Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm Cole Phillips, author of The Adventure of the Twisted Truths and host of Book and Dagger. And today we're going to be continuing our read along of The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. Once again, this is not, if you have not read The Hobbit, this is not meant to replace you going out and buying your own copy and enjoying it. This is an abridged read along by me. But if you have already read The Hobbit and you just want to revisit again, I hope you enjoy this and enjoy it as much as I am. So let's go ahead and get right into it. Chapter 4, Over Hill and Under Hill. So Bilbo and the dwarves have left Elrond's house and Gandalf, and they're journeying into the Misty Mountains. And they take the right, thanks to the knowledge and memory of Gandalf and Elrond's wisdom, they manage to find the right mountain pass so they don't get lost. But it's still a very dangerous path. There's lots of boulders, and the stone giants live in the mountains. The stone giants will throw rocks at each other every now and then, and Bilbo is expecting something unexpected to happen because he's hoping they'll get through without any danger, but he just thinks that something bad is going to happen. And one night they are taking what shelter they can, and there's a stone giant battle going on. And all the dwarves are complaining, and Thorin says, "This won't do at all. If we don't get blown off or drowned or struck by lightning, we shall be picked up by some giant and kicked sky high for a football." "Well, if you know of anywhere better, take us there," said Gandalf, who was feeling very grumpy and was far from happy about the giants himself. And it says the end of the argument was that they sent Philly and Killy to look for a better shelter. They had very sharp eyes, and being the youngest of the dwarves by some 50 years, they usually got these sorts of jobs, when everybody could see it was absolutely no use sending Bilbo. "There is nothing like looking if you want to find something," or so Thorin said to the young dwarves. "You certainly usually find something if you look, but it is not always quite the something you were after." So it proved on this occasion. Anyway, so Phil and Killy go off and they come back. They say they found a dry cave that's much bigger. And Gandalf asks if they've thoroughly explored it, and they go, "Yes, yes." Though everybody knew they could not have been long about it, they had come back far too quick. It isn't that big at all, and it doesn't go far back. That, of course, is the dangerous part about caves. You don't know how far they go back sometimes, or where a passageway behind may lead to, or what is waiting for you inside. But now Phil and Killy's news seemed good enough. So eventually they all go there. They squeeze all their stuff in there. They find there's room enough for their ponies in this cave. And Gandalf, however, is taking no risks, so he lights up his wand, and he explores the cave from end to end. And yeah, there's no secret tunnels. It seems fairly safe. And eventually they manage to, it's dry and warm in the cave, so they settle down. And their mood starts to improve, and they start talking about what they're going to do with the gold once they get it. And Bilbo, however, falls asleep, and he has a very nasty dream. He dreams that there's a crack in the wall at the back of the cave, which gets bigger and bigger and opens wider and wider. And he was very afraid, but he could not call out or do anything but lie and look. Then he dreamed that the floor of the cave was giving way, and he was slipping, beginning to fall down, goodness knows where to. And that he woke up with a horrible start, and he found that part of his dream was true. A crack had opened at the back of the cave and was already a wide passage. He was just in time to see the lash of the pony's tails disappearing into it. Of course, he gave a very loud a yell as a hobbit can give, which is surprising for their size. Then out jumped the goblins, big goblins, great ugly looking goblins, lots of goblins, before you could say rocks and blocks. There were 6 to each dwarf at least, and 2 even for Bilbo, and they were all grabbed and carried through the crack before you could say tinder and flint. But not Gandalf. Bilbo's yell had done that much good. It had wakened him up wide in a splintered second, and when goblins came to grab him, there was a terrific flash like lightning in the cave, a smell like gunpowder, and several of them fell dead. The door crack closed with a snap, and Bilbo and the dwarves were on the wrong side of it. Where was Gandalf? Of that, neither they nor the goblins had any idea, and the goblins did not wait to find out. They seized Bilbo and the dwarves and hurried them along. It was deep, deep dark, such as only goblins that have taken to living in the heart of the mountains can see through. And Bilbo again wishes for his hobbit hole, and the goblins begin to carry them down, deeper and deeper and deeper. And the ponies are taken away because goblins eat ponies. And the goblins chain up their hands and link them all together in line and drag them to the far end of the cavern with little Bilbo tugging at the end of the rope. There in the shadows on a large flat stone sat a tremendous goblin with a huge head, and armed goblins were standing round him carrying the axes and the bent swords that they used. Now goblins are cruel, wicked, and bad-hearted. They make no beautiful things, but they make many clever ones. They can tunnel and mine as well as any but the most skilled dwarves when they take the trouble, though they are usually untidy and dirty. Hammers, axes, swords, daggers, pickaxes, tongs, and other instruments of torture they make very well, or get other people to make to their design. Prisoners and slaves they have to work till they die for want of air and light. It is not unlikely that they invented some of the machines that have since troubled the world, especially the ingenious devices for killing large number of people at once, for wheels and engines and explosions always delighted them, and also not working with their own hands more than they could help, but in those days, in those wild parts, they had not advanced, as it is called, so far. They did not hate dwarfs especially, no more than they hated everybody and everything, in particular the orderly and prosperous. In some parts, wicked dwarves had even made alliances with them. They had a special grudge against Thorin's people because of the war which you have heard mentioned, but which does not come into this tale. And anyway, goblins don't care who they catch, as long as it is done smart and secret and the prisoners are not able to defend themselves. Who are these miserable persons? Said the great goblin. Dwarves and this, said the drivers, pulling at Bilbo's chain so that he fell forward onto his knees. We found them sheltering on our front porch. What do you mean by it? Said the great goblin, turning to Thorin. Up to no good, I'll warrant. Spying on the private business of my people, I guess. Thieves, I shouldn't be surprised to learn. Murderers and friends of elves, not unlikely. Come, what have you got to say? Thorin the dwarf at your service, he replied. It was merely polite nothing. Of the things which you suspect and imagine, we had no idea at all. We sheltered from a storm in what seemed a convenient cave and unused. Nothing was further from our thoughts than inconveniencing goblins in any way whatever. That was true enough. Said the great goblin. So you say. Might I ask what you were doing up in the mountains at all, and where you were coming from, and where you were going to? In fact, I should like to know all about you. Not that it will do you much good, Thorin Oakenshield. I know too much about your folk already. But let's have the truth, or I will prepare something particularly uncomfortable for you. We were on a journey to visit our relatives, our nephews and nieces, and first, second, and third cousins, and the other descendants of our grandfathers, who live on the east side of these truly hospitable mountains, said Thorin, not quite knowing what to say all at once at the moment, when obviously the exact truth would not do at all. He is a liar, O truly tremendous one, said one of the drivers. Several of our people were struck by lightning in the cave when we invited these creatures to come below, and they are dead as stones. Also, he has not explained this. He held up the sword which Thorin had worn, and the sword which came from the troll's lair. The great goblin gave a truly awful howl of rage when he looked at it, and all his soldiers gnashed their teeth, clashed their shields, and stamped. They knew the sword at once. It had killed hundreds of goblins in its time, when the fair elves of Gondolin hunted them in the hills or did battle before their walls. They had called it Oakrist, goblin cleaver, but the goblins called it simply bitter. They hated it, and hated worse anyone that carried it. So then the goblins all go into this rage, and they start shouting about how they're going to kill Thorin and cut off his head. And the great goblin jumps off his seat and rushes at Thorin with his mouth open. But just at that moment, all the lights in the cavern went out, and the great fire went off, poof, into a tower of blue glowing smoke right up to the roof that scattered piercing white sparks all among the goblins. The yells and yammering, croaking, gibbering, and jabbering, howls, growls, and curses, shrieking and striking that followed were beyond description. Several hundred wild cats and wolves being roasted slowly alive together would not have compared with it. The sparks were burning holes in the goblins, and the smoke that now fell from the roof made the air too thick for even their eyes to see through. Soon they were falling over one another and rolling in heaps on the floor, biting and kicking and fighting as if they had all gone mad. Suddenly a sword flashed in its own light. Bilbo saw it go right through the great goblin as he stood dumbfounded in the middle of his rage. He fell dead, and the goblin soldiers fled before the sword, shrieking into the darkness. The sword went back into its sheath. Follow me, quick, said a voice, fierce and quiet, and before Bilbo understood what had happened, he was trotting along again, as fast as he could trot, at the end of the line, down more passages with the yells of the goblin halls growing fainter behind him. A pale light was leading them on. Anyway, so that's Gandalf. He popped in and rescued them, and he cuts through their chains with his sword, which is Glamdring, and which the goblins call Beater, and they hate it worse than Bitter, if that's possible. And Oakrist, too, had been saved because Gandalf snatched away from the Great Goblin when he impaled him. And then Gandalf does a head count, finds out they're all there. And the dwarves take turns carrying Bilbo because Bilbo's can't keep up with the dwarves and Gandalf. But this says, still goblins go faster than dwarves, and these goblins knew the way better. They had made the paths themselves, and they were madly angry. So that do what they could, the dwarves heard the cries and howls getting closer and closer. And so Bilbo says, why, oh, why did I leave my hobbit hole? Says poor Mr. Baggins, bumping up and down on Bomber's back. Why, oh, why did I ever bring a wretched little hobbit on a treasure hunt? Says poor Bomber, who was fat and staggered along with the sweat dripping down his nose into the heat and terror. Anyway, Gandalf and Thorin, they turn about and they kill a bunch of goblins. But then they after they kill the goblins run away shrieking. Then Gandalf and Thorin turn back around. They start running. But then the goblins put out their torches, put on sock shoes, and they chase after them. And they start grabbing them and groping at them. And Bilbo falls off Dory's back because Dory's now carrying his bomber's fat, and he got tired. And Bilbo falls off, bumps his head on a rock, and doesn't know anything. And that is where the 4th chapter ends. And be back for chapter 5. Like and subscribe, comment, and I will see you guys next time.